This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Hey guys, Jay here. Welcome to Miles Memories Weekly, episode 203. Miles Memories is a show about nothing and is filmed in front of a live studio audience. This is a show where I talk about painting, modeling, and wearing experiences from the week. Now you might be thinking to yourself, Jay, you put out 3 videos a week. Oh, could I possibly have more to say? Well, I do, and here goes. This week, one of my favorite games got some new miniatures. Games Workshop did a little oopsie, and I have been working on finishing my Dark Eldar with a really saucy 1,000-point list. But first, have you ever needed your squares absolutely perfectly spaced? Well, today's sponsor, Squarespace, has got you covered. Squarespace allows anyone to design the website of their dreams with the most powerful and easiest design tools in the industry, like Design Intelligence. Using AI technology empowers anyone to build a more personalized website tailored to their needs, crafting a bespoke digital identity. Choose from a professionally curated selection of styling options to build a unique online presence from the ground up. Squarespace makes sure it's easy to launch your website and get discovered fast with integrated optimized SEO tools, so you show up more often to more people and grow the way you want. With Squarespace, it's never been easier to set up a unique online storefront. Whether your services are physical, digital, or service-based, selling your wares has never been easier. Squarespace offers unmatched ability to showcase your unique wares with images, videos, reviews, and add-ons all capped off with their seamless checkout tools, letting your customers use whatever system they prefer, whether Klarna, ACH Direct Deposit, Apple Pay, Afterpay, or ClearPay. Squarespace offers a free trial for you to dip your feet into and test the waters, and ready to dive in headfirst, and go to squarespace.com/EonsOfBattle or follow the link in the description to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Games Workshop did a little oopsie poopsie. Recently on their social medias, they put out a little statement about Armies on Parade. Armies on Parade is a really fun, really low-key thing they do where it seems like people just bring their armies to the store and show them off, and it's really fun. I go every year to my local store, and people get nuts. Like, you see some really, really beautiful stuff, interesting conversions. The whole army painted all the same color on the same base. Sometimes you do like whole scenic dioramas to showcase your minis. It is really, really cool, but apparently there are rules. And Games Workshop made a slight little alteration to those rules that had everyone scratching their head. In the little description, it says, you're free to use conversions too. Want to combine Acolyte Hybrid parts with Cadian Shock Trooper parts to make Twisted Genestealer cultists? Go for it. It's a weird example because they literally make that kit. It's the Blooded Kill Team. Like, they didn't reach too hard for that conversion idea. It goes on to say, you can even use components from different Warhammer game systems where appropriate. Ooh, where appropriate? I wonder what that's gonna mean. Such as incorporating the Necromunda Zone Mortalis terrain into your Warhammer 40,000 display board, or using Sylvaneth parts from Age of Sigmar to customize your Wood Elf army for Warhammer the Old World. However, you can't mix the actual settings. We can't have a Norn emissary on parade alongside Lord Croak. And Cetra the Imperishable can't march to battle with Lionel Johnson. Uh-oh, things are looking a little sticky. And then it goes on to say, parts and components from miniatures set in the 41st millennium and Age of Darkness may not be combined with those set in the Mortal Realms, World of Legend, or Blood Bowl. Why? That's such a weird, completely bizarre stipulation that, like, everyone followed the rules exactly how you'd want them to follow the rules. I've seen crazy cool conversions of people taking like the wings from Age of Sigmar and putting them onto 40k minis, or using some of the more fantasy Warhammer kits and using them in Age of Sigmar. Like, everyone did a perfect job forever, but now they're being so specific about it. You're not allowed to mix and match. And I think it was always a rule that you couldn't mix and match Warhammer and Lord of the Rings, because I think they literally, licensing-wise, can't say you're allowed to do that. But no one was doing that anyway, because Lord of the Rings is in a completely different scale, and so those minis just don't really swap in very well. But it's weird for them to like bring the hammer down and say, you absolutely, the parts will not work. You cannot do it. If you think that some Sylvaneth wings would look really, really good on your Dark Eldar, you can't do that. It's impossible. Even though the Goonhammer guys, one of them has the Sylvaneth wings attached to his Dark Eldar scourges. It looks absolutely incredible. It looks perfect. It looks absolutely seamless. Like, the Games Workshop kits are all by Games Workshop. They have a lot of the same designers. The parts look perfect together. but don't be mixing them. And basically the entire internet said, no. Like, obviously that's not the rule. And then the very next day, Games Workshop made a statement to clarify. As per previous years, you can kit bashes and components from different game systems, but you can't mix whole miniatures from different settings. So yeah, you can't literally take an Age of Sigmar guy, keep him as an Age of Sigmar guy, and put him in your Ultramarines army. No one was doing that. No one was gonna do that. Also, you still can, because it's just the local stores and whatever people bring. Just do it. Everyone's gonna keep doing whatever they want, and it's gonna be completely fine. I guess maybe you won't be featured on Warhammer Community, but I don't know how many people participate in Armies on Parade, and how many people get featured. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people actually participate, and then like 11 get featured. Probably fewer than that, 6 or 7, 5. Like, it's just, it's super, super doesn't matter. But it is super fun that Games Workshop put their foot in their mouth and just made the weirdest little decision. It's almost like, were they trying it out? Were they like, how much control can we try to put on this? And then it turns out none. Okay, never mind. We'll try again next year. It's kind of like when they refreshed their rules on playing games at Warhammer World, and they said that you cannot have alternate bits that aren't Games Workshop, or you can't have your own sculpted bits. And then like everyone thought, oh my gosh, these are rules that are going to be for every single Warhammer everywhere in the world. No, it was only for events at Warhammer World. And I've actually heard from people who play at Warhammer World, there's not a Warhammer cop. Like, they don't really check. You can just show up, play your game with whatever models you've got on the tables, and then go home. Or I guess go to Bugman's bar and get a little something to eat and then go home. It seems like they're so bad at like corporate statements, and there's no way to do it well. It's always gonna feel icky and weird and be like, all right, everybody, I know you're enjoying the Warhammer universe and it's super fun, but just for a little second, we've got to make a corporate announcement about some grand sweeping legislation. And okay, now go back to your Aaron Dembski-Bowden novel. It's just a weird tightrope that they walk, and so often they fall off it. It's good that Games Workshop went back on their statements almost immediately. But speaking of something that definitely would not be allowed in Armies on Parade, one of my all-time favorite miniature war games, Moonstone, got some new minis. And it's kind of like they made these minis for me because the faction that I play in Moonstone is the fairies. And this February, we got some new fairies. I own all of the fairies. I'm very slow at painting the fairies. The hard part is the wings, because you want to do a really, really good job on the wings and you paint a wing perfectly, but then you realize you have to do that same perfect paint job on the other side of the wing. And then you got to do it on the wing next door. And then you got to do it on the back of that wing. And so it's a challenge. It's a challenge to get the fairies painted, but I'm ready for some more. And oh, we got some new fairies. We got an evil fairy, which the fairies are actually kind of like dark and evil. It's set in like a Germanic fairy tale world, but like we got a literal ghost monster fairy, the Banshee. Banshee straddles the courts of the Fey Queen and the Undead King, making her at home amongst the new and old allies. Screaming at the top of her lung, she'll support either side when they come to collect the valuable Moonstone. She's really, really creepy. She's kind of got like an ethereal way that her clothing and wings move. It's a little bit like the Dementors from Harry Potter 3. The way that they're kind of floating in water, even though they're not underwater. It's just the look that they have at all times. It's a really, really cool miniature. And speaking of really, really cool miniatures, we've got Dentia. That's right, Tauber has a very real tooth fairy. Giants and trolls obviously have the biggest and best teeth, but any will do for Denta. The teeth don't have to have fallen out or even be wobbly. She'll happily help with the extraction or two. The main question is, would you like to be sedated or not? It's a tooth fairy. Now, my favorite tooth fairy is probably the tooth fairies from Hellboy, like the really creepy ones that I guess they prefer teeth, but they'll strip you down to the bone. Actually, they'll strip you down to nothing in just a few seconds. Although if they eat every single part of you, why don't they eat your clothes? I don't know, but Denta is a really, really fun miniature. The art that they decided to go with, or like the color palette they decided to go with, is weirdly fleshy. I think I might make a few little changes when I paint my figure, because it's really, really fleshy. But I really like the giant tongs ripping the tooth. It's also fun that Denta herself has really big buck teeth and is a stealer of teeth. The only thing that's a little tricky with this miniature is that the tooth is stuck in the ground. It doesn't quite make sense. How could I, like, if I found like a STL of like a dragon or something, and then I cut it out just perfectly so that it was just the teeth, and then it was just that one tooth, and then she's yanking it out of like the dried bones. That might be a fun way to go about it, because that is a big old molar. The fairies are very, very small miniatures, but even so, that skull is about the size of a human head. And so it's gonna be a little bit of a modeling challenge, but I'm really, really excited for it. And it's just a fun way to get the character flying, because usually the way that they cheat the fairies into the sky is that they're just kind of jumping off of a tree, and they're, or they're like, their back is against a tree and they're flying in front of it, but that's a way that you can get the model to actually touch and for it to really work. But having her big giant clamps be the thing that is actually propelling her into the air is a really, really fun way of doing it. And last but not least, Iris and Heliborn have been abroad for many years at their specialist academy, training for when their homeland and family need them most. These twins are now the most dangerous dancing duo in all of Tauber. Use Iris and her brother Helibor to dodge, duck, dip, and dive your troop out of the way of all of their enemies and hit back hard in melee. This is the fairy giant, I think. It's probably gonna have a crazy pool of health. Hopefully, usually the fairies have a rule called feeble because they're just so small, they can't do things. And so like it's twice as hard for them to pick up moonstones. They're very, very weak sauce in the game, but they make up for it with the craziest rules. It's really fun to play the fairies because we get to do wild shenanigans. We have more actions than anybody, but it all comes crashing down as soon as you take one punch. Because you take one punch and your fairy is either dead or on the verge of death. And so it'll be really interesting to see what this unit brings to the fairies, because are they gonna be really, really tough? Like, giants are tough. It is hard to whittle through all of their different wounds, but usually the way that the game is actually balanced is things with tons and tons of wounds are gonna have a really small action pool. But these are fairies. Fairies usually have a humongous action pool. So it'll be really interesting to see, like, is this just gonna be an absolute Death Star unit? Like, how is this gonna work in game so that it can do all of the awesomeness that you want it to do, but is also 2 fairies on one base? I guess 2 fairies on one base would be 10 wounds, but it's not gonna be like 8 activations, because that would be absolute silliness. Can't wait to try to paint these figures. I also really, really like the art that they designed, but these figures are gonna be tiny, like itty bitty little fairies. And I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna try to paint all of their little paint, like all of the paint that's on their bodies and their crazy kind of galaxy style wings. It's gonna be an absolute nightmare. I'll probably have to break out the magnifying glass that I have that helps me paint really, really tiny things. But man, these guys are gonna take a hot minute, but it's okay because I really, really want to try them out in game. I'm really excited for more fairies. I have all of the fairies, but a game of Moonstone is only 6. And if you're playing a 3-player game, then it's only 4. So you can't bring everything all the time. And so like, I'm always trying to like swap out one fairy and see what happens and swap out another fairy. There's 2 different fairy healers. And so sometimes I'll try to see like how much healing do I want to do. In the game of Moonstone, there's bluffing. Actually, all ranged combat is bluffing. And there's a ranged deck, and the deck has 3 suits of 3 cards, or 3 suits of 3 different cards. I think there's 3 1s, 2 2s, and 1 3. And usually all of your attacks benefit from having higher cards. Sometimes they benefit from having lower cards, but there's something that you're looking for in the deck. And so you just draw a card, and then you tell your opponent, I drew the red 3. And so this attack's gonna be brutal. And then your opponent thinks, okay, well, am I willing to let you do it? Or am I going to try to challenge you? Because if they challenge you, if they call you and they're wrong, then you get to do the attack twice. But if you're right, then the attack doesn't happen and they probably get catastrophed and something bad happens to them. So it's this like weird, you're staring at your opponent and you're trying to see like, are they lying or are they telling the truth? Are they trying to pull a fast one? What's going on here? And then there's a character for the fairies called Gwendolyn. She has a special ability where I can just have one of the cards from the range deck and I just get to have it in my hand and I can always swap it in whenever I want, but I still just know. So if I'm holding the red 2, I know that you've never drawn the red 2, or it's very unlikely that you drew the other red 2 in the deck. And so I just have a little bit more information to work off of. I had this one game where I called my opponent every single time, the entire game. They never got one thing that they wanted. And they're like, how are you doing it so perfectly? I'd always call them when they were bluffing. It was beautiful. Moonstone is such a fun game. But speaking of fun games, I've also been playing Warhammer 40,000, and I have really been enjoying 1,000-point games. I play a lot on Tabletop Simulator, and usually we start a little late Tabletop Simulator, and so usually with a full 2,000 points of Warhammer 40,000, we get through turns 1 and 2, and then kind of just math out what happens with the rest of the game because we want to go to bed. But with 1,000 points, there's half as much stuff on the board, which by the way, half as much stuff on a 44x60 board is still pretty full. It honestly feels a little bit better at 1,000 points. The board definitely feels tight at 2,000 points on a small board, but 1,000 point 40K is actually really, really nice if both people are playing appropriately. Because at 1,000 points, you can write the skewiest, sweatiest, undefeatable list imaginable. I mean, Rogel Dorn and 3 Demolisher Russes isn't even 1,000 points, and it'll just wipe anything. I can't think, I mean, unless the other person only brought anti-tank designed to fight those things. Maybe Knights? Maybe Knights could handle Dorn triple Demolisher Russ. But at 1,000 points, it's only one Knight. That Knight's gonna get one-shotted. Yeah, there's no way. Like, you have to write appropriately, but that's kind of fun. Because at 1,000 points, you can't bring the biggest, shiniest toys. You can't bring the 10 block of Assault Terminators with the Black Templar Tannheiser's bones and the Uphold the Honor of the Emperor vow and in a Land Raider, and it's this giant 500 point mega Death Star brick that can destroy anything in the game. But you can take Assault Marines and a Lieutenant for 135 points, and maybe they get a good target to run into, maybe they don't, but they just have to be doing stuff because every single unit in your army is a little bit more important and they might have to do more stuff. Going through the actual game and the primary and secondary missions, usually in a full 2,000 point game where you have every tool at your fingertips, you can be doing everything all of the time, but that gets a little bit exhausting. In a 1,000 point game, you might have to say, the west flank has fallen. We're just not going to do that objective this turn. We're only going to focus on this side of the board. You look at your cards, you're like, okay, I can seize, but I can't slay Warlord. Impossible, so I'm just not going to worry about that. You can't do it all. And so you just kind of got to pick and choose. And the games are really, really quick and they're really, really fun. And it recontextualizes a lot of the data sheets in your codex because all of a sudden you're looking for the cheap stuff. And then you're like, well, how much can I ask Scout Marines to do? Because at 2,000 points, all I care that they do is uppy downy every turn, standing on objectives or hiding in buildings or doing secondary things. Almost doesn't matter that they're models. They could be pennies. But all of a sudden, at 1,000 points, I'm like, they could maybe do some shooting or maybe some close combat if they absolutely have to. Maybe they can move block some stuff so that the thing that I absolutely cannot lose, everything gets a little bit recontextualized. I have a really saucy Black Templar list that I want to try to run that is very different than my 2,000 point Black Templar list. And the rock that holds this list together is 2 squads of scouts and 2 squads of regular old intercessors. I probably wouldn't bring that, or I would just bring it as bodies to have on the my home field. But in a 2,000 point list, it's like, yeah, I need them. I need bodies. I need people to be doing stuff every single turn. And it's a really, really fun. It feels like playing old school Warhammer 40,000. Like 5th and 6th edition, before a lot of the mega Death Star units had even been invented. And so you're thinking, my humble Rhino might need to charge that squad of Terminators right now because everything has gone wrong and I can't have them getting any closer to me this turn. And so, yep, the Rhino is charging in. Let's see what it does. 3 attacks hitting on 5s. Nothing? Perfect. Every aspect of the game changes just a little bit. Like, usually at 2,000 points, you're looking for those stratagems that boost the lethality of your units. You know, if you can give 20 attacks lethal hits, that can be the thing that takes down the knight. But at 1,000 points with kind of lame units, the things that really, really matter are movement shenanigans and extra shooting or out of phase shooting. Like scouts throwing grenades could change the game, or intercessors that are like rapid ingressing in, like that could be humongous in your opponent's turn. Those sorts of things that are definitely very usable at 2,000 points, they become mean at 1,000 points. I was playing my Dark Eldar into Sean's Imperial Guard, and he overwatched my Incubi, and it was mean. Just combat engineers, a cheap squad of combat engineers. They had a flamer in there. Sean, of course, rolled a 6 for that flamethrower. Got all the hits off. My Incubi are toughness 3. I failed all my saves. And just this guard overwatch shooting took out my melee Death Star unit in Overwatch. It was disgusting. It was kind of a glorious moment, but not for me, because they just died. The Archon lived. He got there. He eventually got through the squad, but that unit was supposed to be bouncing around all game, finishing off units, and instead they got overwatched by a guard with a flamethrower. I highly recommend trying some Warhammer 40,000 at 1,000 points. Let your opponent know ahead of time, like, we're gonna try to play, the goal is to play all 5 rounds at 1,000 points, not to just win the game. Because yes, of course, at 1,000 points, with the new how to build armies where you can just take anything you want, yeah, if you bring 3 dreadnoughts with a 2-up save, it's going to be a very, very skewed game. Or if you bring your Synoptek Heavy Construct or your Baneblade. Is a Baneblade under 1,000 points? Maybe one of the variants. You can very easily write a bad game in the list building. But if you're both trying really hard to be like, what is a really good take all comers 1,000 point list for my army? You'll probably try out some units that are like the units that you always feel like you should be taking, but now you don't have a good enough reason. Like, intercessors are the Space Marines. They're the guys in the stories. They're the guys that are on the codex covers. They should be the biggest badasses in every single one of your games. But at 2,000 points, they don't do anything. They don't shoot very good. They don't fight very good. So maybe you let them come and stand on an objective for a little bit. But at 1,000 points, they're going to have to be scrapping. They're going to have to be actually doing what Space Marines are meant to be doing. And hopefully your opponent can bring enough stuff to that's that scary. And so your intercessors are going to stick around. It's been a really, really fun way to experience the grimdark world of Warhammer 40,000. And speaking of grimdark, we brought a little grimdark to EonsOfBattle.com. EonsOfBattle.com is the place to find our merch, like the Nick and J dice. The J dice tend to roll a little bit better, but the Nick dice, well, the Nick dice do tend to roll better, but I think it's because the J dice roll a little bit more. Maybe Nick has to play some more games and get some more experience with his Nick dice to learn how to roll them properly. On our website, you'll also find the best way to support us doing what we do with a membership. Each month, members get 1 credit that they can use on our new monthly terrain packs or any previous pack we have ever made. For the month of February, we made the Grim Battlefield Basing Bits, the perfect thing for your grimdark miniatures to stand on. War-torn scenery isn't as easy to pull off as texture paste and a grass tuft, but with these bits, it's easy to give your minis the grimdark treatment. With a selection of sandbags and barbed wire barriers, ruined walls, smashed stained glass, unexploded ordnances, and more. All sized perfectly to complement any size of miniature, from giving an upgrade to your small rank and file troopers, all the way up to big chunks of debris to fill up monster and vehicle bases. You can build it all. All these bits can be found on EonsOfBattle.com, both digitally as STLs and for the first time as packs of physical printed bits. Until I can get those Moonstone fairies in hand, I'll be playing some games of Warhammer 40,000 at 1,000 points. I have a Dark Elder list that I'm dying to run, but I also really want to try my Black Templar at 1,000 points. Maybe I'll just have to play 2 games. Thanks for watching.